Dune Part 2 begins with power over spice is power over all. There is no duplicity or vagueness with this Sardaukar proverb, unlike the last quote from the first film. The spice is Arrakis, and the seat of that throne controls the universe. The proverb illustrates the world's attitude towards resources and power. Power is having a monopoly over something everyone needs, so you can name the price. Paul has learned these lessons in the first movie. While the Emperor uses technology and subterfuge to wield power, Paul uses zealotry and desert power to take the revenge he seeks. Villeneuve spends the first Dune introducing us to the world and giving Paul the tools he needs. Dune Part 2 is Paul wielding that power and accepting the consequences of those actions. Paul must no longer allow the world to affect him. He is forced to change his world with the tools he has. Power is the central focal point of Dune Part 2. Power rules all aspects of life in Dune. One of the themes of power we see throughout the film is the dynamic between the sexes. Outside of the Fremen, the only important female characters are Bene Gesserit. All other females are treated as throwaway objects. I think this is intentional to illustrate why the Bene Gesserit exist. The male-driven feudal system of the Empire necessitates the need for a female-driven Illuminati to at least begin to even the disparity. If you read far enough into the Dune series of books, you'll see how that all plays out. The Fremen, though, are equal among the sexes, a Villeneuve choice that isn't in the book, something Chani brags about and Paul envies. You can see Paul's good nature in this, even though he is forced to do something generally evil. Early in the film, Paul is still developing as the Kiswat Haderach. His vision isn't perfect, but he does know that heading south and drinking of the waters of life will lead him to the Holy War to kill billions. While staying in the north and just disrupting spice production doesn't seem like much, it's a honeymoon period for Paul. His love with Chani flourishes and he gets to avoid the Holy War. It's only when Feyd-Rautha forces his hand and destroys Sietch Tabr is he forced to go south. He calls upon his cosmic friend Jamis for advice, who speaks to him in the way of the desert. Paul must reach the highest dune to see everything as the hunter. Paul needs to have the prescience to be successful. And that means Paul is going south. Paul is going through a series of spiritual micro-deaths before he becomes the Kiswat Haderach. This is the first that is painful. It's him losing a piece of himself so that he can become something different. When Paul heads south and drinks of the waters of life, he is given the ancestral memories of the Reverend Mothers, which not expressly told in the movie, but told in the book that Paul is a mentat with almost infinite processing capabilities, can now see the future clearly. He even gets to interact with his sister, who's a Reverend Mother from inside the womb. Taking the waters of life has supposedly left him in a catatonic state. It takes a tear from Chani, whose Fedaykin name is Desert Spring, so a tear from a desert spring to awaken him. Watching this event transpire for Stilgar and the other Fremen is a religious revelation. But I'm a little skeptical of this. I'm a little skeptical that it was needed. The Fremen religion is just the Bene Gesserit plans and propaganda, and Paul knows that he needs religious zealotry to command the Fremen. He also knows Chani's Fedaykin name coincides with the prophecy. Paul's Jesus-like resurrection cements his messiahhood. This is why Chani is so upset. She's being used as propaganda. It's why Jessica uses the voice to make her do it. This is the lament Paul has earlier. In the film with Chani, he uses her for manipulation. When Paul is alone with his mother, they both acknowledge that Jessica is Vladimir Harkonnen's daughter. This is another micro-death for Paul. Paul has to let go of the Leto Atreides inside of him, and survive as Harkonnens, as he says, to follow the one path, the golden path, that leads to success. After this, Paul fully embraces playing the role of Lisan al-Gaib. As Paul confronts the fundamentalists, he is playing a character. He fulfills the prophecies the Bene Gesserit have planted in their heads. He gives them hope of a paradise for Arrakis, and he shames his father's vision and name by claiming himself the Duke of Arrakis and of the Fremen. Everyone is along for the ride other than Chani, who knows this isn't just. But just matters little when the alternative is annihilation. With the power Paul now wields, he challenges the Emperor for the throne. When the Emperor arrives in Arrakeen, Paul plans his assault on the Emperor. Paul watches as his father's atomics destroy the shield wall, a possible foreshadowing of a future. We then get to enjoy the spectacle of the Fremen destroying the Sardaukar. Paul gets to murder his grandfather, and Gurney gets revenge on Rabban. We are then brought to the endgame. Paul duels Foyd for the Emperor's throne. Paul once again suffers the little death needed to overcome Foyd. By letting Foyd get wrapped up in the pleasure of the kill and the allure of the throne, Paul is able to take the blade from his side and stab Foyd in the heart. Paul takes the throne from the Emperor, but the great houses don't accept it. With one final little death, Paul sends the Fremen off to paradise, to kill billions across the universe, continuing on the golden path. After watching this movie, Villeneuve cemented himself as one of the greatest filmmakers ever, in my opinion. Not because he faithfully recreated the book into a movie, but where Villeneuve deviated from the book is where his brilliance showed. Villeneuve breathed so much life into the Sardaukar and the Harkonnens that wasn't in the book, changing the dynamic of the sexes by making female characters more impactful, making Chani a more independent character with her own mind and defiant of Paul. The biggest deviation Villeneuve makes is making Paul less of a classical hero and a complicated character who must make tough decisions, and us as the audience don't see the righteousness of the Fremen victory because we feel the impact of the Holy War. Herbert's vision properly communicated. After the release of Dune, Herbert stated it was to be a lesson to be wary of charismatic leaders. But to be honest, I've read the book, that doesn't come across. It is very much a classical hero's story. And so that was the reason why he wrote Dune Messiah, to really hit it home that this was not to be taken as a classical hero story. With Villeneuve's deviation from the original novel, he's able to tell the story of Dune in the more intended way that Herbert had wanted. And in a lot of ways, that makes this movie a better version, honestly, than the novel itself. It's more true to what the author wanted people to feel. I think that what Villeneuve was able to illustrate with Paul's struggle of being the Kiswat Haderach and going down the golden path is something that honestly doesn't really come across as much in the original novel. And you don't really see it till Dune Messiah. And it's a little bit of an abrupt turn. So the fact that Villeneuve has now taken it and integrated that into earlier parts of the story helps communicate that message. And in doing so, we get to see a spirituality of Paul and philosophy behind Paul that is interesting, unique, and complicated. I think the thing that this movie shows that makes it a really groundbreaking piece of art is it shows that these complicated concepts of being successful but also not feeling good about that is something that we don't really get to experience very much in filmmaking. I think that these two movies brought a level of relevance back to filmmaking and the movie-going experience. It showed to us that it is not a dead art form, that there are still stories to be told and original concepts to be explored in filmmaking. It broke free of the Marvel Disneyfication of filmmaking. It broke free of the analytical, calculated thought puzzles of Nolan type films. It is a film that is spiritual. It is a film that is philosophical. It is a masterpiece that no one else has been able to achieve in filmmaking. And it makes me excited as a filmmaker to watch this because it energizes me to go out and try and make something just as uniquely original. Even though this is a story that was written back in 1965, Villeneuve was able to infuse it with something new that we have not yet experienced. Thanks for listening to my analysis of Dune Part 2. It would mean a lot if you wouldn't mind liking the video and subscribing to the channel, and if you consider supporting me on Patreon, it goes a long way to helping me make more of these videos. Thank you.